$40 billion in total assets and employing over 10,000 people. By 2013, it was reported that more than half the world's internet population used Facebook. How has this been achieved? Through the simple expedience of harnessing popular narcissism. In the beginning, the Harvard Yearbook was a way for students to see themselves and their achievements listed for peer approbation. It was compared by the Harvard Crimson to a website named Friendster, wherein people could find similarly minded individuals and create a network of friends. But it was also compared by the same publication to the popular website Hot or Not, wherein people would load pictures of themselves onto the site and get ratings from users on a scale of 1 to 10. In the ensuing versions of the website, features like these were dropped, but the like button performed a similar, more subtle function on Facebook. Rather than being ranked, which might leave some users feeling aggrieved at their overall score, one could just accumulate an indefinite number of likes. In this respect, the widely used term social networking site is inadequate. It is a social narcissism site. The like button is as important as the friend button to getting you hooked on Facebook. In this review, we're talking about the technology, the profit strategies, and above all, the politics of Facebook. All new popular phenomena attract elements of moral panic and over-the-top opposition by people committed to the idea that there's something more authentic about technologically less sophisticated ways of living. An early reaction by Idler editor Tom Hodgkinson, with Friends Like These published in The Guardian, was typical in suggesting that Facebook would just make people more selfish and less likely to communicate in real life. Traditional right-wing newspapers such as the Daily Mail trade on lurid stories about Facebook undermining moral fibre and damaging your child's brain. But this is not just the response of reactionaries. CBS asks how real a risk is social media addiction and reports on a new phenomenon being noised abroad, so-called internet addiction disorder, wherein people grow so inured to the release of dopamine as a result of the likes, the comments, and the retweets that they receive, that they can't stop themselves checking their social media feeds every few minutes. Social media marketer Jason Thubeau wrote a widely shared post about abandoning Facebook in order to break his addiction. And indeed, such declarations are quite a regular feature for people who use the site, friends declaring that in order to reclaim some control over their lives, they are abandoning Facebook. Psychiatrists in Munich have now added Facebook addiction to their ever-proliferating list of modern disorders, according to the Journal of European Psychiatry. Psychologists at the University of Bergen have developed a Facebook addiction scale to help place patients in relation to the supposed extent of their dependency. And there is some tentative evidence that the regular use of Facebook changes the brain structure of users, as The Guardian reports, that those with more friends develop more brain activity and more grey matter in regions of the brain associated with memory, emotion, and social interaction. CBS reports on a number of studies suggesting that the changes to brain structure are similar to those affecting substance abusers. It quotes the researchers saying that internet addiction disorder may share psychological and neural mechanisms with other types of substance addiction and impulse control disorders. Bill Davidoff, summarizing similar reports in The Atlantic, argues that as we become able to shape our online environment more perfectly around our needs, we become more narcissistic. He then adds that narcissists are setting many of the benchmarks for everyday users. Everyday users get caught up in popularity contests and experience anxieties. Some report becoming depressed because they are being out-Twittered and are lacking in thumbs up. The emergence of new addictions and disorders is simply a routine feature of the medicalization of social phenomena, something that has been built into the approach of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders since 1980, wherein disorders are defined against a normality that exists nowhere. The real question avoided by much of the news-based commentary is what role narcissism plays in the profit-making strategies of Zuckerberg and his colleagues. What is Facebook's business model, given that it doesn't charge users for any of the services it provides, from the news feed and timeline to the messenger function? Basically, there are two key sources of revenue. One is payments from developers who use the site to promote apps and games, but the overwhelming source of revenue, making up 85% of income in 2011, is from advertisers. In other words, The platform is designed as an optimal marketing platform. Its use of likes and networking, its organization and management of personal relations and emotions, and its manipulation of narcissism is designed to keep the user in a receptive state for advertisers. At any rate, there are more pressing political reasons to be concerned by some of the infrastructures that Facebook and social networking sites like it are laying in place. One of the most irritating aspects of the entire Silicon capitalist sector, from Google to Facebook, is its tiresome sense of progressive self-righteousness. While they cheerfully avoid taxes, as The Guardian reported, Facebook paid no corporation tax last year for the second year running, they also appear to align with liberal democratic politics. Facebook's innovation of a simple app allowing users to add a rainbow to their profile picture in response to the US Supreme Court's gay marriage decision, reported by Time magazine, was an extremely low-cost way of effecting this alignment. Far more grotesque and more insidious was the wave of obnoxious celebrations of Facebook as a force for revolution in the context of 2011, Tahrir Square, and the early days of the Arab Spring. The habitual phrase Twitter revolutions suggested that there was a necessary connection between democratic rights and the spread of communications technology. A typical argument along these lines was provided by Jose Antonio Vargas in the New York Times Sunday Book Review, in which he claimed that the Egyptian revolution which overthrew Hosni Mubarak began on Facebook. Chris Taylor, who manages the technology website Mashable, agreed, telling CNN that it was a Facebook revolution. CNN extolled Egypt's Revolution 2.0. In fact, while a small number of important activists did use Facebook to spread information, and the Egyptian Google executive Wael Ghonim did the network a tremendous service by publicly thanking it for its role, as reported in the Huffington Post, most Egyptians who revolted had no access to Facebook. Such networks were important for a highly educated, literate, and largely middle-class layer. But notably, Mubarak's attempt to control the revolt by shutting down internet services did him no favours. And as the BBC noted, even in technological terms, more important than Facebook was the fact that 80% of Egyptians used mobile phones at this time and were able to record repression and ensure it was broadcast across the Arab world. The predictable backlash articles against such techno-utopianism, such as Malcolm Gladwell's New York Times piece, "Does Egypt Need Twitter?", missed the point entirely. He noted, as if no one had thought of this, that people protested and brought down governments before Facebook was invented. As if the question was not what sorts of politics Facebook enabled. If Facebook claims credit for contributing to democratic politics, what can be said about its role in repression? A little-known case from the UK of Azhar Ahmed, convicted for a Facebook post, illustrates how Facebook can be used for surveillance. The BBC reports that Ahmed was convicted for a soldier's death slur. In fact, what he said was, in response to reports of war crimes in Afghanistan, was that the soldiers should burn in hell. This emotionally overwrought political statement was deemed fit for punishment as a grossly offensive communication. That is, precisely because the opinion was expressed on Facebook, it was fit for a sentence. Facebook itself operates as a vast data collection tool, aggregating user information. It retains all information uploaded by users in servers based in the United States, including that which had been deleted by the user. And as Forbes reports, its current policies enable it to sell whatever aspects of your online profile it wishes. As The Guardian reports, the European Court of Justice has decided that this leaves users in a precarious position, as following the Edward Snowden revelations about the NSA accessing mass server data in the US, it is clear that their information is not safe from US government surveillance. The risk is not just state surveillance, of course. There's also corporate surveillance and the rising phenomenon of cyberstalking, wherein users obsess over other users' statuses, photographs, and online interactions. Soon, Facebook will become a far more efficient source of data mining, as the BBC reports that the site is indexing over 1.5 trillion posts by its users over the years in order to allow them to be found by other users. This could be seen as a move intended to diffuse criticism of Facebook's practices of hoarding data in order to sell it on by giving users some advantages in exchange for their data being used in this way. And this is the problem that all of the moral panic and all of the misguided or oversimplified criticism ultimately boils down to. The technology and its clearly prodigious promise has slipped out of our control, and its effects, whatever they are happening without our being able to understand or account for them adequately. The only thing that is certain is that Facebook has developed a highly profitable way of monetizing people's need for attention, admiration, and friendship. That's the Facebook revolution.
From a young age, we're taught fidelity to the system and to the state. We all grow up saying the Pledge of Allegiance in school, but the words "under God" we take for granted. Those words were added to the Pledge of Allegiance in 1954 to exclude American communists. Communists, of course, are godless heathens. That piece of history is largely unknown, but the ideology behind it is probably the most known idea in American society.
This town may appear to be an accurate likeness of a typical American community, but it's a fraud. It isn't free.
Socialism has spread the shadow of human regimentation over most of the nations of the earth, and the shadow is encroaching upon our own liberty.
If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist.
Now that you've become acquainted with the enlightened communist system, in contrast to the outdated capitalistic way of life, you are now prepared for the next step of your indoctrination.
You won't have to worry about next year. The state will do your planning from now on.
Then we'll overthrow it by force and violence. We'll have our way if it means bloodshed and terror.
Because the news about communism is getting around. But it's only another word for slavery.
In almost every industrialized country in the world, socialist parties have huge representations, large membership bodies, and hold many elected seats in government. But in America, everyone knows that being called a socialist or communist carries an immediate negative connotation. The term is frequently used to smear people and groups, not necessarily for being one, but merely for associating with one. So what is this unacceptable ideology? To find out, I talked to a founder of a socialist organization in the United States, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and longtime socialist organizer Brian Becker.
People think Karl Marx was the originator of socialism, maybe modern socialism, but you look at early Christianity, early Islam, the early tenets of Judaism, a lot of it has a yearning for the old days, the yearning to go back to primary or social existence where there's cooperation and equality. Socialism is the ideology reflecting the desire by people who want change, people who want to get rid of the evils and the injustices of the capitalist society and replace it with a new society, a society based on public ownership. And public ownership means that instead of the corporations and the banks and the wealth, all that which is created by the labor of human beings, working people, instead of that wealth being accrued and accumulated by a small percentage, it is used for society's needs. In the United States Constitution, people are given political rights. The homeless get the right to vote every 2 or 4 years, but they don't have the right to a home. The socialist program is everyone must have the right to employment or an income if they can't work. Everyone, as a guaranteed constitutional right, must have a place to live that's affordable. And healthcare should be free, and education should be free. Now, those 4 things, that's the hallmark of the socialist program, that's been demonized, but if you ask most American people, certainly the have-nots, they'll think, yeah, those are pretty good things.
And what are socialism's roots here in America?
Well, socialism has very deep roots in America. Most Americans don't know it, but the rise of the kindergarten, the rise of public education, the rise of something called Social Security. That is, when you retire and are no longer productive, no longer able to be employed by a capitalist productively, you should not be living a life of poverty, Social Security. The idea of unemployment insurance, meaning when you're laid off, not for any fault of your own, but because the capitalist system routinely goes through economic recessions and depressions, you should be cared for by an unemployment insurance. These are the ideas that originated with the socialist movement.
In the late 1800s, there was an intense battle between organized labor and the country's industrial capitalists. With socialists in the leadership, the labor movement was on the cusp of winning the 8-hour workday, and the corporate owners were willing to do anything to keep working their workers to the bone. Workers on strike all over were shot and killed by police during this fight for what seems like such a basic human right today. In 1887, 7 anti-capitalist leaders in the movement were sentenced to death on trumped-up charges, 4 of them publicly hanged. It was a clear message to anyone involved in radical politics. The battling ideologies of capitalism and socialism in America is more than just opposing arguments. It's been a real battle with real weapons, where one side was exiled, sent to prison, and murdered. Anti-communist paranoia continued to build. Struggles that outraged the rich, like child labor laws and women's right to vote, were labeled red plots. President Woodrow Wilson was helping push for new